Now, today I'm going to go over the 4 stages of alcohol use disorder, and it's important to listen really to the end and understand late stage 3, stage 4, and the grisly end of result of years of alcohol abuse. It's so important to really go over the first stage and the second stage. Really, these are the stages where it's important to identify that a person has a problem, a loved one in your family or in yourself, and recognize it's time to do something about it. Like any disease, whether it's cancer or heart disease, it's always better to catch it, nip it in the bud before it gets out of hand, before it affects somebody physically, emotionally, psychologically, before it destroys their life and everybody in their vicinity. Anybody that's been down that road certainly understands that. It's important. It's important to really separate the different levels of this addiction and understand the natural progression that the mind and body goes through by going through this horrible malady known as alcohol use disorder. Now, the thing with alcohol use disorder is it's not really a mental physical disorder until you get to stage 3. It's important to realize the first 2 stages are really leading up to that. It's the groundwork of the direction somebody goes to. Stage 1, for example, is really called the experimental stage. And this is a stage where most people go through between the ages of 13 and 20 is when they're initially trying many different things. They may be trying drugs and alcohol. They have a lot of exposure, high school kids, college kids, peer pressure. Quite often, this could also be the early development of maybe family culture. It's been normalized within that person's family to drink alcohol or to be around drugs or that kind of environment. It could also be a hereditary disposition, unbeknownst to the person who's starting to head down that road. ADH1B and ALDH2 on a chromosomal level can actually give someone a predisposition to becoming an alcoholic or suffer from AUD. The thing is, it's not necessarily a death sentence. The thing is, most of those people who do have a predisposition also grow up in a family culture where it's normalized. Recognizing someone who is drinking, starting to drink on a regular basis. It starts maybe in high school. And they've done a lot of studies. For example, someone who drinks before the age of 15 has a much higher probability that they're going to have a problem later in life, down the next 10, 15 years. Because if you're exposed to alcohol and you have access to alcohol at such an early age, that means there's some kind of normalcy that's going on in your life as a child. Recognizing that in yourself is very important, because this may not be 100% your doing. Okay, if your parents drink, if your grandparents drink, your siblings, cousins, and your friends' family, your friends, your parents' friends, and you're immersed in it and you watch adults drink, there's really a high probability that you're going to be really enveloped into that kind of a culture. Be aware of that. And this is really, for so many people, is how it starts. Now, the reason people go down this road and do develop into AUD, the reasons, the why, can be as varied as the people who do go down this road. For most people, 50% right off the top, it's family culture and hereditary disposition. You grew up in an environment where it was okay, where it was normalized. The rest of it could be so many different things, but it's all designed around anxiety, stress, depression, and repressed emotions. These are the causes, these are the reasons why people begin to go down this road. Their why? It's the Band-Aid. It's covering up their emotions that they don't want to deal with. So say if especially when you're in your teenage years, you may be socially awkward. You may be introverted. And in a way to be and to deal with social situations is to consume alcohol. It's so readily available. I mean, when I was a kid, there was kegs of beer at every party. Today, there's lots of things, as there was when I was a kid. But you have so much exposure when you're at that age. Understanding, that's where it begins. People say it's a choice. Not really. We are the people who we surround ourselves with. If you're around 5 people who drink, you're going to be the 6th one, no doubt. Or there's certainly going to be a high probability that you're going to be that 6th person. We become the environment that we grow up in. So important to realize that. The hard part is it's almost impossible to recognize that you're in that situation if that's your culture. I mean, unless you have the you have the ability and the advanced intellectual, emotional maturity to look back and say, you know what, this may not be the road I want to go down to. Now, that's not something that's normal when you're 15, 16, 17, 18 years old. But that's maybe what it's take. That may be what it takes. You know, maybe you're an athlete and you want to go in that direction, and alcohol isn't conducive to that. Something like that can save you. It's so important to recognize your emotions and to deal with them in more and better and more powerful ways, and more productive ways. And again, really, the foundation of stage 1 alcohol use disorder is these repressed emotions. I mean, it can be a number of things, and these repressed emotions can be maybe someone has a dual mental issue, PTSD, post-traumatic stress syndrome, ADHD, attention deficit disorder, bipolar, schizophrenic, borderline personality disorder. Somebody could be on the spectrum of autism. I mean, these are the reasons why people drink, or they could have some other mental malady, some other mental problem. These are the reasons why people drink. There could be high stress. Certainly, trauma in youth is a big reason. You know, maybe you were abused physically, sexually, emotionally, psychologically. These are the reasons why people escape into drugs and alcohol. Recognizing this is the origins of your why is essential in understanding where you're moving forward and how to recover from this disease. Stage 1 is the experimental stage. All of these things that we've talked about are the foundation of where stage 1 begins. Experimental means you're trying alcohol, wine, beer, spirits, marijuana, fentanyl, whatever, cocaine, speed, I mean, whatever drug is available, and you're trying all these different things. And eventually, one may resonate with you, and that's the road you go down. Many people, it may be beer or wine or spirits, but it's important to understand that there will become a drug of choice, and that's the direction that you're going to. Stage 1 is determining what your drug of choice is, and the fact that you have a why that you're drinking at all. This is stage 1. Important stage. Recognizing that you have started down that road is so important, and having the ability to recover. So really, to summarize stage 1, most people start their alcoholic career genuinely between age 13 and 20 during the formative years. And the problem with that is the human mind is not really matured until age 25. So if you're taking alcohol and you don't have a developed mind, it's only going to affect your emotional maturity and your mental maturity. It's going to stunt your growth. And so many people do go through this. The vast majority of people who do reach 25 or 30 tend to grow out of it. Everybody who drinks is not going to suffer from alcohol use disorder. It's important to point that out. The vast majority of people, they may have careers, get married, they move on from the alcohol, they grow out of that situation. But there is a segment of the population who does become dependent on the alcohol because it's covering up their why, their repressed emotions, their anxiety, their stress, their depression, their boredom, things like that. And it's important to understand that. If you can recognize that in yourself, that you have a problem, and have the ability and the cognitive awareness that, you know what, I got to do something about this. If you can get it at stage 1, you got the best fighting chance, because the probability, like any disease, that you can nip this in the bud, the earlier the better, because before your body has become physically and mentally, emotionally addicted and dependent on the alcohol. And one last thing that I want to point out before I get into stage 2 is that alcohol use disorder affects, just in the United States alone, 29.5 million people. So we're talking about almost 9 to 10% of the entire population of the United States. From that 29.5 million people, all of these people have families. They have sons and daughters and parents and siblings and grandparents and aunts and uncles and friends. Indirectly, this affects closer to 150 million people because it's a family disease. Literally half the population it affects directly or indirectly. And on that note, the ages between 12 and 17, when most people are in their stage 1, 10.7% of the population between 12 and 17 have alcohol use disorder. It's one of the highest rates of alcohol use disorder in the age group, age 12 to 17. This is where it begins. Recognizing that's the problem, the earlier the better. Let's go on to stage 2. And now let's get into the middle stage, or better known as stage 2 of alcohol use disorder. A lot of people don't realize to get into that stage, we're talking about a consistency has been developed. Now you've kind of gone through the experimental stage, and now you're looking into, and you've kind of settled into your drug of choice. Maybe beer, wine, spirits. For a lot of women, it's vodka. For a lot of people, it's something that they can hide. And eventually, I'll get into the later stages, it becomes anything you can get your hands on. But it's alcohol. And alcohol, the reason why alcohol is so prevalent is because of the accessibility. And again, I'll get into that later, but accessibility is a big part of the problem. You can go on your iPhone these days and have it hit a couple buttons, and DoorDash will be there in 20 minutes with a case of beer at your doorstep, or a couple bottles of wine in most states. And it's crazy. And that kind of accessibility is really the bane of the family's existence, of people who have an alcoholic in their family. I want to get back to normalized drinking, but drinking in moderation. Now this is by the American Medical Association, but for women, a moderate drinker is someone who drinks 1 drink or less per day. A moderate man drinking is 2 drinks or less per day. And by the way, the American Medical Association recently came out, as did the World Health Organization, and said that no amount of alcohol is safe, period, across the board. They don't recommend alcohol in any context because it's essentially ethanol. It's a poison that you're putting in your body. It will, even moderate drinkers, it will affect your liver, your heart, your pancreas, and your kidneys, and your intestinal tract and your esophagus, and eventually your brain. Even moderate drinking is not good in a consistent basis, and we're talking about stage 2, where we've created a consistency. Now, for alcohol, this is considered alcohol misuse. For women, 3 drinks or more in one day, or more than 7 drinks in a week. For men, it's 4 drinks or more per day, or 14 drinks in a week. This is considered alcohol misuse. Now, I know there's people out there going, "Oh my God, I drink 10 beers a day." I'm not. Yeah, you got a problem if you're doing that. And I've made a lot of videos on that. Binge drinking for women is more than 4 drinks in a 2-hour period, and for men, it's 5 drinks in a 2-hour period. So if you've had 5 beers, which watching a football game can be normalized for a lot of people, that's considered binge drinking. 5 beers. If you're a 200-pound man, 180, 200-pound man, 5 beers, you're binge drinking. And people think, "Wow, God, that's nothing. I do that every day." Well, and then be aware it's a problem. And to really recap, the best way to really characterize stage 2 is consistency. Okay, you're drinking every day, or almost every day, and it's become your go-to product to deal with your emotions. It's a reward system for so many people at this point. They made it through their work day, they made it through their school day, and it's a reward at the end of the day. So they drink a bottle of wine, or maybe they have a couple glasses and it's developed into a bottle of wine. Or maybe that those 2 or 3 beers has worked itself into a 6-pack, and it's on its way to working into a 12-pack a day. Or some people tend to be more binge drinkers on a Friday night, Saturday night, on the weekends, and that's become their reward system. Yay, I made it through the week. Now I can bust out. I don't have to do anything tomorrow. And guarantee if you're going to binge drink on a Friday or Saturday night, you're right. You're not going to do anything the following day because you're going to be too hungover and you're going to have to drink just to get through your hangover. Not a good way to go. It's not a way. This type of consistency is the ground floor of horrible things to come in your life, of things like destroying your relationships, the most important relationships in your life. Later we're going to get into this, but spousal relationships, parents, and the hardest of all, and it's the most heartbreaking of my clients that I ever have, is when it's parents having to deal with their alcoholic adult children. It's the most heartbreaking thing you could go through, because you don't want to have to give up on somebody, but sometimes you have no choice because you have to take care of your own mental health because it's become abusive and psychologically manipulative, and it's not something anybody should be around. But stage 2, recognize that you have a problem with consistency. If you have a family member who you're seeing going down this road, that weekends have somehow kind of permeated into Monday, you got to have the hair of the dog because you drank all day Friday and Saturday and you're hungover Sunday, so you had a little bit on Sunday, and all of a sudden it's Monday and you need, maybe a beer or two in the morning just to go to work. Well, it's permeated and it's escalating. This is the natural progression of this disease. And eventually it's going to be Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday that you have to get over that weekend binge. And when you get to that point, you're a full-blown stage 2 alcohol use disorder candidate. You're drinking consistently every day and you're binging during periods of the week. You've created a physical, mental, psychological addiction. And this is a very scary place to be. You're not there yet, probably because you're young. Your body still has a higher probability to heal itself. Luckily, the liver has a high probability to heal itself. But you're affecting so much more than just your liver, okay? Your pancreas, your kidneys, your intestinal tract, your eyes. People don't realize your skin, for example. And this is the saddest part of all. It will prematurely age you, unfortunately. For women, it's an important fact to understand. If you don't want to get to the point where you're 30 years old and you look like you're 45, then maybe you got to stop drinking in your 20s, for example. And another real important realization, and this is really for family members who are watching their loved one go through stage 2, for example, is that it becomes a very narcissistic type of disease, type of disorder, very self-centeredness. And even if it's not the nature of the person, if they're normally a very kind, loving, caring person, like my wife was, and again, I was married for 25 years, my wife succumbed to this disease a little over 5 years ago. And she was all of those things. She was kind and loving and bubbly, and it becomes a very narcissistic disease, and it starts to develop in stage 2, where the alcohol overrides the importance of the relationship, or it overrides maybe taking care of your job. So you're okay to call in sick because you're too hungover. It becomes a priority, and you need to take care of your physical self because you're dealing with the alcohol. This is when these type of things start to permeate and introduce themselves into your life. This is when escalation is the most noticeable. When you've gone from a couple glasses of wine to a full bottle of wine. My wife, for example, when we first met her, she drank a couple glasses of wine at night, maybe a bottle. Eventually it became a bottle every night. And then that 0.75 liter, like a normal quart bottle, became a 1.75 liter, which is more like half a gallon, closer to. That's a lot of volume. Empty calories, it begins to break down your body physically. All these empty calories, you will gain weight, your skin will prematurely age, and it'll begin to affect your organs. If you can see this in your loved one, it's important at this point to point it out, and maybe even an intervention may be necessary before they get to stage 3, which is next on the plate. And really the last thing I want to say about stage 2, the middle stage, is that this is really where, as a family member or as someone who's recognizing this in themselves, this is the time when you need to double down on your sobriety and recognize that you have a problem. Okay, if you're missing work, if your drinking has escalated, if your relationships are suffering and you're hearing kind of a lot of nitpicking, you might think it's nitpicking, but I mean it's genuine concern from maybe parents or significant others, or maybe your children, people who genuinely care for you, and they're starting to go, we're not liking what we're seeing, and you think, oh, they have a problem, I don't have a problem, I like to drink, what's the problem? I'm not hurting anyone, I'm hurting myself. And you are really going down that thought process, you're headed for disaster. I got to tell you, that's the worst thing. If you're gaslighting and deflecting because you want to protect the alcohol, which has become your solution, please recognize that and listen to the loved ones. Listen to the objective truths from family members and close friends. They're telling you the truth. They genuinely care about you, and you should genuinely listen to what they're saying. Now, let's talk about stage 3 of alcohol use disorder. And for all intents and purposes, this is really the longest stage. This is what you would characterize in normal cultural nomenclature as a full-blown alcoholic. This is someone who has become physically, mentally, psychologically addicted to alcohol. It's become a priority in their life, more important than their relationships, more important than their parents or their spouse or their children, unfortunately. And this is when the narcissism appears to really take over. And so many times you hear spouses from a spouse who's passed away, and they say, well, they chose alcohol over our family. They didn't really choose one over the other. Alcohol becomes their only choice. That is their life. And that's an important fact to understand. You can't take it personal. And I always say this with family members that I really counsel all the time. It's not about you. Okay, it's about the alcoholic protecting their emotions. The alcohol has become their solution to whatever's troubling them. The anxiety, the stress, the depression, the boredom, whatever it is, it's become their solution. Understanding that is very, very important. But stage 3, it's tough. This is when you start getting into legal problems for a lot of people. You may have a DUI, 2 or 3. You can get into altercations and really alter your life in very bad ways. You can get behind the wheel of a car and harm yourself or harm someone else. This is stage 3. I also want to say that stage 3 isn't, and this isn't how we think about people, but a full-blown alcoholic is not necessarily the homeless person on the street. Could be your mailman. Could be the housewife next door. Okay, could be the governor, the mayor of your town. I mean, things like that. It could be somebody in a position. There are things such as functioning alcoholic, which is really another form of denial. There's no such thing as a functioning alcoholic. You either are or you're not. Just because you're able to hold a job this week doesn't mean you're not an alcoholic. And unfortunately, and I've come across this a lot, people who do and are able to maintain to some degree and still have a good income, or an income that's providing for other people, it puts the spouse and maybe the children of that person in a very bad position, because they have to rely on this person who's also an alcoholic, and they know that that person is a ticking time bomb. And they may be hesitant in intervening because it's going to directly affect them financially. And all I can say is this, is you have to, because, I mean, you're either going to be affected financially now, or it's going to be later, and it's going to include having to purchase a casket. And no one talks about this, but someone who's in stage 3, the probability that they're going to get out of this and nip it in the bud has dwindled significantly from stage 2. Very high probability that they're going to, there's a higher probability that they're going to slip into stage 4 and ultimately succumb to the disease, as compared to they're able to put this in remission and recovery. it's a higher probability that they're going to go the other way because they have become physically, emotionally, and psychologically addicted. Important to recognize this. And this, you as a family member, I want to get into that on the next segment. And I really need to point this out as you as a family member. To begin with, you didn't create this disease, okay? You didn't start it. You didn't pour the alcohol down their throat. You aren't the cause of it, and you're not going to be able to solve it. Family members, when you have a stage 3 alcoholic, all you can do is create boundaries. If you have parents to a adult alcoholic child, or maybe a younger alcoholic child, could be in their teens or in their 20s, for example, you have leverage if they live with you. Look, you're going to a detox rehabilitation facility, maybe you're going to a sober living facility, you're definitely going to do some kind of outpatient program, or you're not going to live with us anymore. It's important for family. All you can do is not enable the situation and make it worse. This is a time for tough love. It's a time to recognize that. I want to say that, really, very important. Stage 3, this is when it comes into play. Now, for spouses, that's always complicated, and it's always complicated because you love the person, but you don't love the disease. It's almost like, to some extent, you have to have an exorcism, okay? And think of it like that. You have to get this demonic possession of alcohol use disorder out of that person, and it's going to take tough love sometimes. These are the boundaries that you must do. What you must not do as a family member to the alcoholic in your family, don't buy them alcohol on a regular basis. Don't drink with them. Don't become part of the problem. Don't support them if they're doing nothing. It will only exacerbate the problem, make it worse, and allow them to go deeper and deeper into their disease. Now, characteristics of a stage 3 alcoholic is they're going to hide their bottles and cans. It's very, very systematically, it's a huge red flag. Very common. In other words, you're going to find bottles underneath the couch, underneath the chairs, underneath the bed, in the flower box, maybe in the hamper, maybe in the toolbox, or weird places in the garage. You might find them underneath the car seat, in the trunk of the car. They're going to hide them maybe in the gutters, all kinds of weird places. But you will find them, and you're always going to have a feeling like they're kind of skirking around and scurrying around because they have bottles hidden all over the house. Very, very common. And it's very stressful for the alcoholic because they know that you know, but they don't want it to be exposed. It's a very weird Twilight Zone place to be. Everybody knows about it. It's this elephant in the room, but nobody knows how to approach it. The important thing is to find those bottles, put them out and say, look, this is what's going on. What are we going to do about it as a family member? If you're the alcoholic, you have to recognize in yourself that you are destroying yourself and everybody around you if you have that cognitive ability. But that's what's taking place. The other red flag is if you're drinking in isolation, you drink alone. You drink alone in your bedroom, in your car, you go hide and drink. This is not a normal process of alcohol intake. It's supposed to be a social event and limited process. You're not supposed to drink an entire bottle of wine in the car by yourself, for example, like my wife used to. The other thing is, if you don't have the ability, and this is a big one, to regulate your alcohol intake, you go to a party, you recognize this in your loved one, a family event, a business event, some kind of social event, and they have alcohol. It could be a picnic. And they drink until they pass out, and you have to carry that person home every time. If there's alcohol around, it's going to be consumed until it's gone. That's their mindset. This is a stage 3 alcoholic or late stage 3 or 4 alcoholic. They will drink everything in their sight, and because that's what they do, it's become their identity. If you're seeing any of this in your family member, or if you understand it in yourself, recognize it's time to double down, recognize you have a problem, and seek help. Now let's talk about help in the next segment. Now, help for an alcoholic can be very varied. It depends on the person's personality. It depends on their degree of problem. I mean, if you're a stage 3 alcoholic, I highly recommend going to a detoxification center and a rehabilitation center. So they detox you for, say, 3 days to a week, depending on how much alcohol you had in your system when you arrived. Then the rehabilitation facility could be 30 days, could be 60, could be 90, depends on insurance. And again, most insurance covers these types of things as part of the mental health care side. Even state coverage, if you're on Medi-Cal, Medicaid, something like that. It does cover the mental health care side. Where there's a will, there's a way. Highly recommend that. It's not just for the alcoholic, it's also for the family. It gives the family a break. Everybody is able to sit back and maybe gather their emotions, take a break from the toxicity and the drama and the turmoil. The alcoholic gets to concentrate and work on himself for 30, 60, or 90 days. It's not the end all, it's the beginning. It's a band-aid, and then the real work is when they get out, when they re-enter their life and are surrounded with all the problems that they weren't in a rehab. A rehab is an island, okay? It's not reality. The reality is when they get home and they have access again. This is the true test. This is when a coaching program, like what I represent, or counseling, or maybe a psychiatrist, or certainly outpatient coverage, this is when the person has to double down on that. AA, Smart Recovery, Women for Sobriety, LifeRing, or a local organization. Sometimes those are the best. If you live in any kind of cosmopolitan area, any kind of populated area, there's going to be a local outfit, local outpatient place where you can go. And I would recommend going every single day for at least another 90 days at minimum, either online or in person. This is the work that a person has to go through. And then other things I really want to suggest on that, in the same note, is there's also sober living facilities where you can go and live for up to a year. You have to get a job. It's basically a residential facility. There may be, 5 or 10 other people in the facility, depending on how big the house is. You have to have a job, and they check you periodically for alcohol or drugs. So they're going to check on you. And if you do have alcohol or drugs in your bloodstream, they're going to kick you out of the program. It's very important. Or they may give you a second chance, but it's going to be, very, very strict. Important thing to look at. Also, this is where you really got to recover. If you can stay there for a year, I would recommend it. The longer you separate yourself from the alcohol, the higher the probability that you're going to get healthy. The last thing I want to point out is there are also medications. Pharmaceuticals are not the answer, but they are a tool. They may be 5 or 10%, that little hump that gets you over the top. Antabuse, for example, if you take Antabuse, it can make you physically ill if you drink. And naltrexone, for example, is a blocker, and it will help you with the cravings of alcohol. If you are craving alcohol, I would recommend those to help you get over that hump if you are in fact in recovery. These are tools that you would use along with outpatient care or Smart Recovery, LifeRing, or if you're in a sober living facility. On top of that, you will need counseling. You need to immerse yourself and be around other people who are also in recovery. Just like the environment when you were drinking, if there's 5 drinkers, you're the 6th one. If you're around 5 people in recovery, there's a much higher chance that you're going to be the 6th one. And if you bond with people in outpatient or in rehab or in a sober living facility and grow true friendships, you're on the road to recovery. Okay. And then there's stage 4. And I'm glad you've gotten this far, because this is an important stage. And if you've gotten this far and you find yourself identifying with this stage, it's something you really need to double down on, because you're in a life or death situation. You are in stage 3 as well, but stage 4 is when your body begins to break down. You may have cirrhosis. You may have ascites, which is fluid buildup in your abdomen. At one point, they took 50 pounds of fluid out of my wife's stomach because she looked like she had triplets, because her liver was no longer functioning. If you have anything like that going on, it's important to do something about it. Family should be able to point that out. This is the time when people begin to lose jobs. They lose relationships if they haven't already. You begin to find yourself very isolated. The only people you're going to be around are fellow alcoholics, people who are also late stage. You might be a regular in a bar, for example. If you go to a bar every day and it's the same people, they all have a problem, because that's not normal to go drink and sit at a bar and drink. They're all alcoholics. There's no question. And if that's your ecosystem, these are the people you're hanging out with, you're in deep doo-doo. Okay, if that's who you're identifying with. You've become physically, emotionally, chemically addicted. The percentage of people who survive stage 4 is between 0 and 5%. You have a 95% chance that you're going to succumb to this disease. And it's not it's not something I would wish upon anybody. I can't say that enough. You're going to lose your dignity, you're going to lose your friends, you're going to lose your family, you're going to lose yourself economically, you're going to lose your health and your ability to be a functioning human being in society. That's a fact. You're not going to be functioning. So many people, this is when they get into the homeless stage for some people, or they're in horrible situations. They may be living in a cheap hotel, or they're certainly going to be isolated. They're going to be alone, because eventually family and friends have to make themselves a priority. After you've broken every trust, every rule with people over and over and over again. I mean, human beings are human beings, and it gets to the point where they just simply can't be around it, and they have to move on. You would be surprised. I've seen parents give up on their children. You never give up on them, but it comes to a point where they can't live with you, for example, or you're not going to support them economically or emotionally, and you need time away. Heartbreaking. It's a heartbreaking, horrible experience for anybody that's been through this. I'll give you a story of my wife, for example. She was a stage 4 alcoholic. Her life centered around alcohol use. She had a knee replacement in September of 2019, 5 months before she passed away. At night, she used to get up at before in California, you can sell alcohol up until 2 o'clock in the morning, and then 6 o'clock the following morning. So she would get up 1 o'clock, call an Uber with her crutches, walk down the end of the street, catch the Uber so we wouldn't hear it. 1 o'clock in the morning, get alcohol, hide it in the bushes so she would have alcohol for the next day. That was her life. She'd sit there and watch television 18 hours a day. This is after rehab, after outpatient program, after house arrest, after losing her freedom because she had DUIs. She was incarcerated for 60 days and 65 days, 2 different times. Actually in a jail. This is a domestic housewife who was a very wonderful person, but the alcohol took all that away. This is just one example of the 29.5 million people who suffer with this disease in the United States alone. Now, stage 4 is when the alcohol has really broken your body down as well. There's a high chance you have some kind of liver issue, either ascites or fatty liver or cirrhosis. It will affect your kidneys, certainly your pancreas. You can have it causes all kinds of cancer. They don't tell you this when you're buying a bottle of wine. It doesn't have all these problems that's going to be a result. Alcohol causes almost 200 different types of cancer: breast cancer, esophageal cancer, intestinal cancer, pancreatic cancer, skin cancer, all kinds of cancer. It's caustic, it's poison that we're putting into our bodies. Not something I would wish upon anybody. People don't realize that. And the worst thing is Wernicke-Korsakoff. This is called wet brain. It's better known as a form of dementia. Essentially, you're drunk all the time, even if you do have a period where you're sober. You have trouble walking and talking and speaking. It's like you really look like you've had a stroke. And yet it's because you have number one, you have a B1 deficiency, because if most of your calorie intake or your vitamin intake is from alcohol, well, you're lacking in certain vitamins. Your brain actually physically atrophies in stage 4, and you become essentially a stroke victim. Not a place you want to be. You're not able to take care of yourself. You become dependent on others if there's anybody else in your life. I can't paint a more bleak, drastic picture than that. And the probability that you're going to get out of that is almost zero. Now, I say never give up hope, because there are people who are able to get through that. But the probability is very, very small. The chances that you're going to succumb to this disease are much higher than you're going to escape it at this point. Being aware that this is the end of the road, be aware, and that hopefully you will take the people and your family and friends who are helping you long before you get to stage 4. I really hope they are able to help you and get to you, and you're able to make that commitment yourself. At the end of the day, your recovery is 100% on you. You can't blame it on your parents, your spouse, your boss, the government, economic problems. It's 100% your responsibility. And until you're able to take that culpability and realize, I got to take care of me, I got to solve this, no one is going to solve this problem but you. And when you've made that determination, then and only then do you have a fighting chance. And from someone who lived with an alcoholic for 25 years, and the passion that I have to help other people and families that are going through this, I hope you make that decision. And if I can help you in any way, shape, or form, let me know. And again, really just to finalize, I do have a complete coaching program. It's called There's an Alcoholic in the Family. Link is in the link tree on this page. You can easily find it, set up a breakthrough call. Takes about 45 minutes, sometimes as much as an hour, depending if there's other family members. We're going to do a deep dive into what's going on with you. I want to make sure a person is ready, ready to do what they need to do. And I will coach you through every step. It's an 8-9 week course. The first week is really an onboarding, and we set up a blueprint of what you're going to do for the next 8 weeks. You're going to replace activities with more positive activities, and we'll get into that. I want to involve your family. There's an entire course that you take. Your family can take it too. That's really shot in studio, and it's a lot of very important education on how the family deals with this, as well as the alcoholic. Essential. Okay, and I developed it for people who come out of rehabs, detoxes, or are actively in an outpatient program. You need to be in some kind of outpatient program to get involved with me, because your head has to be focused on recovery, at least in some capacity. And I will kind of root that out. I want to find out where you're at. I want to take people who are ready, not people who are just playing games. I don't want to be just another person who's just on the road to your unrecovery. I'm here to get people recovered, and that's what we're going to do. I'll do it with your family, because it's a family disease. It's so important. It doesn't always have to be. Sometimes it's just the alcoholic, and sometimes it's just the family, because sometimes the family needs counseling too. Important, set up a call. Again, I'm looking for people who want to change their lives and the lives of their family. And thanks so much for listening this far. And really, the very last thing I want to do on this video is talk about the memoir, Amanda, A Cautionary Tale of Alcoholism. It's the story of my wife's 25-year decline with alcohol use disorder. We were married for 25 years. She passed away 5 months after our 25th anniversary. It's an important story, how it affects the family, and certainly her natural progression towards a horrible ending that I wouldn't recommend for anybody. Important story. Again, link to purchase is in the bio. There's a link for international orders if you're outside the United States. You can also buy it on my website. It's available on Amazon for the hard copy. This particular copy I just showed you. Ebook is available on Amazon, the Apple website, and Barnes & Noble. And again, thanks so much for listening.